The command deck of Vraxian's Edge throbbed with low-frequency hums, the kind that settled into bones like a second heartbeat. Dozens of alien crew members, clad in scaled uniforms and photonic gauntlets, scurried from station to station beneath the gaze of their commander. Jarrell stood at the center of it all, tall, statuesque, red-skinned, and unyielding. Her armor had seen centuries, judging by the faint plasma scarring across her pauldrons and the worn emblem of the Threxian warlords carved into her chest plate. Her golden braids swung with every turn of her head, tight and precise like the woman herself. "Bring the orbital scans on screen. Now!" Her voice sliced through the air like a vibroblade, causing a junior technician to nearly fling his datapad across the deck in panic. "And someone please tell me why Deck 6's gravity keeps hiccuping like a dying Avarian eel." "I'll take a look," came a voice that didn't tremble. In fact, it didn't belong to any Threxian on deck. Human, male, unbothered, and annoyingly chipper. Jace Granger stepped from behind an exposed conduit panel, fingers still crackling with minor residual charge. His brown utility jumpsuit was streaked with iridescent coolant and something suspiciously green that might have once been alive. Gravity's misbehaving because someone, definitely not me, spliced a fusion regulator into a stabilizer feed. Good news, nobody's floated into a wall this hour. Yet. Jarrell turned slowly, eye twitching just enough to register disapproval on the Threxian emotional scale, which ranged from glare to execution-worthy offense. "Engineer Granger, are you implying you caused the malfunction?" "I'm implying I fixed it. Causing it was more of a collaborative effort between me, my lack of coffee, and Threxian labeling conventions. Seriously, why do your wires hiss when you touch them?" "Because they dislike incompetence." He grinned. "Then they really hate me." Around them, the crew pretended to be busier than they were, heads lowered, eyes flicking nervously. Jarrell's expression did not change, but she did allow the corner of her mouth to dip downward in a way that might have meant amusement. Or impending violence. Jace liked to gamble. As he approached her station, checking a blinking diagnostic display, he leaned just close enough to make her eye him sideways. "You know," he said casually, "you look amazing today." The world didn't stop spinning, but the command deck did. A panel somewhere behind them sparked once. A console beeped in protest and then quietly shut itself off, like even the machine had decided to take a moment. Jarrell didn't blink, didn't breathe. For 3 entire seconds, an eternity in Threxian war protocol, she stood frozen, mouth slightly open, as if the compliment had short-circuited her military firmware. Jace scratched the back of his neck. "I mean, not just the armor, though. Wow, that too. You've got this whole fierce goddess of doom thing going and—" "Okay, I'll stop talking now." Her eyes narrowed, but not in the way they usually did before she ordered someone spaced. "You are an idiot," she said, voice quieter than usual. He placed a hand over his heart. "Only the finest." She turned away abruptly, calling out new coordinates and barking for status updates. The crew, sensing an opportunity to not die, scrambled back to work. One technician coughed nervously and returned to mapping orbital trajectories with unnecessary vigor. Jace walked off toward the maintenance corridor, hiding his smirk behind a data tablet. He didn't see the way Jarrell glanced after him, brief but unmistakable. Nor did he notice her hand brush her braid, as if ensuring every strand was still in place. And somewhere, deep in the command systems, the artificial intelligence made a soft note in its logs. Unusual response detected. Commander. Trigger phrase. You look amazing today. Threat level. Emotional. Jarell did not retreat to her quarters. She stormed there. Each step clanked against the alloy floor like a percussion line in a war march, the kind that preceded orbital bombardments. Doors hissed open before her without delay. Sensing the distinct energy signature of a commander whose emotional readings had spiked from composed detachment to mildly flustered, a classification so rare in Threxian physiology that the AI almost filed a mechanical bug report. Inside her quarters, Spartan, sharp-cornered, lit with the cold blue hues of a disciplined warrior's sanctuary, Jarell stood rigid in the center of the room, arms crossed, eyes closed. "Computer," she said evenly, "define the human phrase, 'You look amazing today.'" The response was instantaneous. A compliment typically associated with admiration of visual presentation. Usage implies attraction, praise, or romantic overture. Jarell's eyes opened. Romantic. Overture. She said the words like they were chemical compounds she'd never mixed, probably because, in her case, she hadn't. The Threxian concept of affection involved ceremonial wrestling, shared blood trials, and a joint declaration of planetary conquest. Compliments were for diplomats, or the dangerously unhinged. Which one was Jace? She replayed the moment. His smile, the way he didn't stammer or flinch, the way the temperature in the room had inexplicably risen by 4 degrees. And worse, how her own internal regulators had faltered for a full 5.2 seconds. "I need a recalibration," she muttered. Outside, Jace was recalibrating something too. The ship's lower ventilation manifold, which he'd successfully repaired using a spoon, chewing gum, and what might have once been a stabilizer rod for a plasma cannon. He wasn't entirely sure. It had hummed with contentment, so he assumed it liked him. "Are you talking to the air duct again?" asked Tielo, the 4-eyed Threxian mechanic who'd adopted Jace like an unfortunate stray. Jace grinned. "Technically, I was complimenting it. Told it hums like a dream. Positive reinforcement works on machines, you know." Tilo blinked all 4 eyes in sequence. "You also complimented the commander." "That's different. She's much more dangerous than the air duct." "Why would you risk your life like that?" Jace wiped grease on his pants. "It was an impulse. She looked, I don't know, like a statue that could punch a hole through the moon. I got nervous and flattered her." Tilo tilted his head. "And you lived. Which is suspicious." Up on the bridge, Jarell returned to her duties. She said nothing about the compliment, nothing about the moment. If anyone dared bring it up, they would receive the full intensity of her command glare, which was rumored to have once melted a surveillance drone. But then came the morning briefing. She entered with her usual command presence, sharp posture, armor gleaming, braid immaculate. But this time, she paused when Jace entered behind her, chewing on a stim bar and humming something suspiciously human. She didn't acknowledge him, except for the smallest adjustment of her stance, a turn of her shoulder toward him. Almost inviting. The I noticed. "Commander!" barked Lieutenant Ruvak, dragging attention to the holotable. "The diplomatic envoy to Ilaris 4 has requested a human technician accompany them. They've expressed discomfort interfacing with Threxian tech without one present." Jarell nodded. "Assign Granger." Jace blinked mid-bite. "Wait, me? I thought I was still banned from diplomatic events after the fizzy wine incident." "You're not there to talk," she said, not looking at him. "You're there to fix whatever they inevitably break." "And if I talk?" She met his gaze, just for a heartbeat. "Then I will ensure your mouth is replaced with something more productive. Like a static converter." He saluted with his snack bar. "Understood, Commander." I'll pack duct tape." And though no one dared mention it, for the rest of that briefing, Jarell's tone was just a little lighter, her scowls a little slower. And when she passed Jace's station, she didn't say a word, but her braid swayed just a little longer in his direction. The drop shuttle shook like it was being politely but persistently kicked by a small god with anger issues. Jace clung to his seat harness, teeth rattling, trying to remember whether he'd updated his will. Probably not. The clause about death by diplomatic mission felt oddly prophetic now. Across from him sat Commander Jarell, unbothered. Her armor was freshly polished, shoulders square, hands resting on her knees like they belonged to a meditation monk rather than a battle-hardened warlord. Her eyes were closed, probably rehearsing every possible way this mission could go wrong, and whose fault it would be. Spoiler: his. "You look relaxed," Jace muttered over the comm. "I am calculating casualties if the landing fails," she said, without opening her eyes. "You are fourth." "That high, huh? I feel honored." I did not say it was in order of priority. They touched down on Ilaris 4, one of those diplomatic hotspots where peace talks went to die. The planetary surface was deceptively beautiful, full of sky-tinted flora and oddly shaped structures that looked like coral reefs made of crystal. It would have been breathtaking if the diplomatic compound weren't surrounded by guard drones and hovering sniper pods with kill probabilities hovering at 82%. "Just another peaceful meeting in paradise," Jace muttered as they approached the gate. The Ilarian delegation was waiting. Tall, willowy beings with transparent skin and glowing neural ridges. They bowed stiffly, clearly thrilled to have the Threxian delegation arrive, with a grease-stained human tagging along. One of them made a comment in a language that sounded like someone gargling wind chimes. Jarell turned to Jace. "They say you smell like carbon sadness." "Well, at least they're observant." The meeting room was a disaster of diplomacy. The Ilarian leader accidentally insulted Jarell's battle braid, an unforgivable offense in Threxian culture, and Jarell responded by slicing an ornamental centerpiece in half with her retractable blade. Things were going downhill until one of the crystal translation terminals began sparking violently. "Oh, great," Jace muttered. "Here comes my moment of glory, or flaming death." He dropped to his knees, scanning the underside of the machine. Alien tech hummed dangerously. One wrong move, and it would implode in a very undiplomatic way. He pulled out his portable interface, a screwdriver, and, for reasons even he didn't understand, a banana-shaped connector he'd stolen from the mess hall because it looked important. Behind him, Jarell stood motionless, watching the room. "I can fix this," Jace announced confidently, then paused. "Probably." "If you kill us all," she said. "I will personally haunt whatever afterlife your kind believes in." He flashed her a grin. "Better than dying alone, right?" The room held its breath. The crystal glowed red, then yellow, then, miraculously, settled to a soft, serene blue. Jace exhaled. "And that, ladies and glowsticks, is how you seduce a translation module." The Ilarian leader blinked slowly. "Your human speaks strangely." Jarell didn't respond. She was still staring at Jace. Not with fury, not even annoyance. Something more unreadable. She'd seen him joke under pressure, grin in the face of cultural collapse, and charm a device engineered to vaporize. Back on the shuttle, Jace collapsed into his seat with dramatic flair. "Well, that was only moderately terrifying. Think I impressed them?" Jarell buckled in beside him. "They asked if we breed you for this level of recklessness." "Did you tell them yes?" "I told them we tried to breed it out of you." Jace chuckled, then tilted his head. Seriously, though, did I do okay? There was a pause. Then she looked straight ahead and said, "You were adequate." He beamed. "Commander, that's practically a marriage proposal in Threxian." She turned slowly toward him. "Do not make me regret sparing you from the casualty list." He winked. Too late. The storm rolled in without warning, as Ilarian storms were prone to do. Silent, shimmering waves of atmospheric static that sent most species scrambling for shelter and forced translation software into fits of poetic nonsense. The diplomatic compound's shield grid shorted out mid-negotiation, and a pulse surge fried every navigational beacon in the area. So when Jarrell and Jace were separated from the rest of the crew while rerouting through an underground transit tunnel, it wasn't entirely surprising. "In my defense," Jace muttered, as the heavy security doors sealed behind them, "this looked slightly more like a shortcut on the map." Jarrell gave him a long look, the kind normally reserved for disobedient lieutenants or malfunctioning plasma rifles. "You read Threxian military schematics upside down." "Left-handed," he corrected. "It's a human thing. Builds character." She didn't bother responding. Instead, she scanned the area with her retinal HUD, then muttered something about architectural sabotage and fragile diplomacy built on idiot foundations. They ended up inside a derelict observatory, buried half a kilometer beneath the surface. Crystal panels were cracked, light filters flickering in and out. There were remnants of ancient tech everywhere, floating stasis globes, half-dead AI terminals mumbling nonsense, and a ceiling that groaned with every shift in the storm above. Jace kicked over a defunct hollow emitter. Cozy. Very post-apocalyptic Airbnb. Jarrell activated her armor's thermal field. "We wait until extraction coordinates stabilize." "Great," Jace said, plopping onto a nearby beam. "So, we're stuck in a haunted science museum with no snacks. Cool." For a while, silence reigned. Jarrell sat cross-legged, armor hissing softly as its systems cycled. Jace watched her from the corner of his eye, debating whether asking personal questions counted as bravery or just poor impulse control. "So, do you guys ever get, like, downtime?" he asked. "I mean, I've never seen you do anything recreational, unless yelling counts." "We do not recreate." Her voice was flat. "We train, we plan, and occasionally we hunt." "Well, now we wait. Want to play a game?" Jarrell blinked. "A game." "Yeah, it's called I Tell a Story and You Don't Kill Me. Very popular on Earth." Her eyes narrowed. "Proceed." Jace launched into a wildly exaggerated story involving a spaceport, a stolen hover skateboard, and a diplomatic cat who may or may not have tried to assassinate him with a fork. Jarrell didn't laugh, but she listened. Really listened. When he finished, there was the faintest twitch of her lips, possibly a smile, or gas. "My people tell stories through blood rituals," she finally said. "Sounds messy. I prefer punchlines." He glanced at her, expecting another cold retort, but instead found her watching him, not with the usual scorn, but with something softer. Curiosity, maybe. Or confusion. Like she couldn't figure out why a man with oil-stained boots and a terrible haircut kept making her forget the tension in her spine. Outside, the storm rumbled. "You asked me once why we never relax," she said suddenly. "It is because we are not allowed to. Peace is a temporary illusion. We must be ready." Jace tilted his head. "Maybe, but sometimes illusions are all we get. Might as well enjoy them while they last." Jarrell stared at him for a long time. "Your logic is flawed." "Yep," he said, lying back on the floor. "And I'm still alive. Coincidence?" Silence stretched between them, warm and strange. Eventually, she lay back too, still in full armor, of course, like relaxing was an ambush she needed to be ready for. "Commander?" "Yes?" "You look amazing today." She didn't freeze this time. She just exhaled slowly and said, "You already used that line." The shuttle doors hissed open with theatrical timing, revealing the high chamber of the interfactional banquet hall. Lights glittered along curved ceiling spires, reflecting off glass floors, and ornamental drones that floated lazily, spraying gentle bursts of aromatic mist. Jace sneezed. "They weaponized cologne," he muttered, wiping his nose with the sleeve of his borrowed tunic. "Fantastic!" Commander Jarrell strode beside him in her ceremonial battlewear, a terrifying combination of ancient Threxian steelwork and minimal silk panels that made Jace's brain stutter. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to bow, salute, or call for a fire extinguisher. She caught him looking. "Say nothing," she warned, voice low. "I haven't said anything," he said, eyes still wide. "Your face said everything." Several alien delegates turned to observe them. One whispered something that made another giggle. Jarrell's shoulders tensed, not with fury, but discomfort, which in her case was possibly worse. Jace leaned in. "If it helps, I think you look amazing today." Jarrell didn't react, but a beat later she muttered, "Your timing is increasingly problematic." They took their places at the long diplomatic table, an elongated oval of shifting holographic surface, calibrated to change its center display depending on who was speaking. When the Ilarian minister began a toast, the middle of the table displayed an animated flower opening in slow motion. Jace, trying to act normal, reached for a translucent drink that glowed faintly blue. "Don't," Jarrell said quietly. "I wasn't going to." "You already did." The liquid hissed in his mouth and numbed his tongue almost instantly. He coughed, slapped his chest, and whispered, "Okay. Wow. That's like kissing a neon battery." The minister paused. Everyone turned. Jace raised the glass and gave a shaky thumbs up. "Delicious," he croaked. Jarrell closed her eyes for a moment longer than necessary. Things devolved quickly. One of the rival delegates from the Drax Consortium began openly insulting the Threxian way of command, using what Jace assumed were metaphors about fruit, but might have been something worse. Jarrell's hand twitched toward the blade at her hip. The room held its collective breath. Jace stood suddenly. "Speaking of fruit, did you know humans once worshipped a banana god? Whole civilization. Very slippery theology." Everyone stared at him, especially Jarrell. He smiled. "Point is, strange customs make strange allies. Let's not judge war cultures by their rations or rituals. Otherwise, we'll end up comparing fork etiquette, and no one survives that debate." There was a long, awkward pause. Then, to Jace's astonishment, one of the Drax delegates laughed. Just once, short and sharp, but it rippled around the table like a pressure valve releasing. Jarrell leaned toward him as the tension in the room slowly evaporated. "Your method is unsound," she murmured. "Your logic is absurd," he grinned. And yet, I will allow you to keep your vocal cords." Promotion? Survival. After the banquet, as the delegates dispersed and the hall emptied into laughter and shared posturing, Jace lingered near the entryway, rubbing at the side of his neck. Jarrell approached slowly, silent until she was nearly beside him. "That joke," she said. "The banana god." "Yeah? Does it actually exist?" He looked at her, solemn. "Only when someone slips." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, so softly he almost didn't believe it, she made a sound. A huff. sharp and breathy. Not quite a laugh, but close. Very close. Jarrell stood in front of the holo display, arms crossed, staring down a crisis that refused to blink back. The banquet had barely cooled when the news hit. Poisoned delegates, tampered security logs, false flag transmissions. The interfactional alliance was now splintered, and somehow the blame pointed squarely to Vraxian's Edge. "We are being hunted," she said flatly. Jace, who had been halfway through a rather triumphant bite of breakfast paste, paused mid-chew. "Hunted? As in, run for our lives hunted? Because I already finished my heroic monologue quota this week." Jarrell didn't smile, but she didn't glare either, which, in Jace's book, was basically flirting by Threxian standards. She zoomed the holofeed in. Red alerts pulsed over 3 sectors. Ships had already begun positioning. The diplomatic immunity of her crew had been revoked. And the worst part? Whoever set them up had done so using Threxian clearance codes. Jace leaned in. "You think it's an inside job?" "I think," she said, "someone wants to see how well we scream under pressure. Lucky for them, I squeal like a malfunctioning trash compactor." She turned to face him. "We must respond with precision and restraint." Jace nodded. "Right. Precision. Restraint. Also, just putting it out there, maybe not blowing up everything in a 50-kilometer radius." Jarrell looked thoughtful. 20. Deal. The plan was madness, which meant it had potential. They would fake a breach in the lower hull, leak escape pod signatures, and mask the real movement of the command team aboard a disguised courier vessel headed into neutral territory. Meanwhile, Jarrell would make a public transmission offering herself as bait, under the guise of negotiating surrender. "You sure this won't just get you shot in the face?" Jace asked, watching her adjust her blade straps. "Statistically, only 47% likely." "That's not comforting." "You're still coming." "Right, because I bring—" "What exactly? Sarcasm and bad ideas?" "You bring unpredictability," she said, turning to him with the faintest quirk at the corner of her mouth. "And sabotage tends to fail when faced with nonsense." They launched from Vraxian's Edge under cloak. The two of them squeezed into a corvette, barely large enough for one Threxian and a confused lunchbox. The interior rattled like it had been assembled during an earthquake by blindfolded interns. Jace hit his head twice, just trying to sit. "Your species ever heard of ergonomic design?" he grumbled. "We design ships for function, not comfort," she replied, adjusting the navigation field. "Your knees are not my concern." The decoy transmissions went live. Enemy vessels moved into position. As expected, a coded message came through: "Surrender accepted. Commander to report alone." Jace looked at the screen, then at her. "So, just to clarify, we know it's a trap. You're walking into it anyway, and I'm supposed to pretend that's somehow part of the plan." "Yes." He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "Okay, but if you die, I'm making a whole documentary about how this was not my fault." They docked under a fake registry, landing inside a cavernous war station converted from an asteroid husk. Armed guards lined the platform. Jarrell stepped forward, shoulders high. Jace moved beside her, slower, faking a limp to sell the helpless tech assistant role. "Don't improvise," she whispered. "I always improvise," he whispered back. "Then do it better, this time." The doors opened. The trap sprung. And somehow, Jace smiled wider. Because chaos was coming. And for once, it might actually be fun. Jace landed hard on the grated floor, narrowly avoiding a boot the size of his face. Plasma bolts whizzed overhead, lighting up the corridor with flickering purple pulses. Jarrell was already moving, blade extended, cloak flared, taking down 2 guards with a precision that would have been elegant if it weren't so thoroughly terrifying. "This is still the subtle part of the plan, right?" Jace shouted, crawling behind a generator that was humming far too ominously. Jarrell didn't answer. She pivoted mid-strike, caught a soldier by the shoulder, and slammed him into a wall panel that instantly shorted out and set off the fire suppression system. A burst of cold fog filled the corridor. "Because I don't want to be dramatic," Jace added, "but I think I just swallowed whatever alien flavor your fire foam is." "Stop talking and move," she snapped, grabbing him by the collar and yanking him to his feet. The inner chamber was ahead. According to the AI decrypt she'd force-fed into the enemy systems, that room contained the real culprit, the saboteur who'd framed her crew and triggered the diplomatic disaster. Jace had bet 20 credits it would be someone with a mustache. Probably twirled it. Turned out, no mustache. Just an old Threxian commander, stripped of insignia, his crimson armor dulled by time and poor choices. His grin was a thing of rot. "I told them you were soft," he hissed, stepping down from the platform. "You took humans on board. You let one of them compliment you." Jace raised a hand. "Technically, I compliment a lot of people. You want one?" "Silence, worm." Jarrell didn't blink. "You betrayed the command? Risked war for what? Pride?" "For correction," he snarled. "Our species lost its edge. You proved it. Sidelined by emotion. By him." "Hey, I'm very distracting," Jace muttered. Jarrell stepped forward, slow and steady. Her blade did not rise. "You wanted proof," she said. "You got it. You brought chaos into our order. But I adapted. I didn't freeze. I chose." The old commander lunged, and Jarrell moved like lightning. No hesitation, no fury, just quiet, perfect calculation. One strike, fast and final. The room fell silent except for Jace, who coughed awkwardly. "So, not the time, but I'm pretty sure I found the controls to broadcast his confession." "Want me to press the button dramatically?" She turned her head. "Press it like a professional." He hit it with his elbow. Vraxion's Edge picked them up 3 hours later, with the fleet already retracting its weapons. The footage had spread fast, confession, sabotage, and all. Jarrell was cleared. Commendations were issued. The diplomatic alliance, bruised but intact, began to reform. Jace sat in the engineering bay, fiddling with a drone that refused to stop singing. Tilo stood nearby, looking skeptical. "You survived a political assassination plot, 3 ambushes, and a romantic compliment without being vaporized. Impressive." "Luck," Jace said, "and reflexes, mostly the reflexes of hiding behind stronger people." Jarrell entered without announcement, still in her armor, braid shining like polished gold. "Granger," she said. "With me." Tilo blinked. "Am I about to lose my least useful assistant?" "Definitely maybe," Jace said, hopping up. They walked in silence through the corridors, past crew who now looked at Jace like he wasn't entirely expendable. He tried not to let it go to his head. Or at least not both heads, in case he was secretly part alien. She led him to her private chamber. The lights were low, the hum of the ship steady beneath their feet. "I reviewed the mission logs," she said. "You improvised again." "Only when absolutely unnecessary. I've filed a report." "Oh, no." She stepped closer. "I noted you acted with initiative, loyalty, and excessive sarcasm under duress. I'm guilty on all counts." Jarrell studied him for a long moment. Then, without ceremony, she reached up and removed a single pin from her braid, letting one gold strand fall loose over her shoulder. I am allowed to choose my alliances. Right, he said, heart thumping. Strategic partnerships and all that. She stepped even closer. This is not strategic. Jace opened his mouth, closed it, then smiled. You know, he said softly, you look amazing today. This time she smiled back, and she didn't freeze.